Warning, this podcast contains explicit sexual language and should only be listened to at work if you're looking for an excuse to connect with your HR representative. Additionally, all mentions of the word women include cis, trans, NB, genderqueer, gender fluid, and those still figuring it out. Yes, you. You are welcome here.
Will you open up with me? These pages, they can feed your innermost desires. Do you feel inspired? Are you getting what you need? Are you coming curiously? A secret safe with me. And here you can simply be yourself. Jace reads romance. Come on in, come on in, come on.
Hi, y'all. This is Jace, and you found Jace Reads Romance, a community empowering women about sex and sexuality through the reading of romance novels. We have a repeat guest today. So if you have not gone and listened to our episodes with Courtney Abbott, you should. They're great. She was one of my guinea pigs, and I appreciate her so much. But we're about to talk about something very different today. So Courtney, would you like to share who you are and why I brought you back, besides just having fun?
For sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Courtney Abbott. I use they and she. I am a theater artist living and working in Chicago, and my first career was teaching sexual assault prevention to college students, university students, and to the U.S. military. So I spent a lot of my life talking about consent and about bystander intervention and about ways that culture, groups of people, can decide what to tolerate and what not to tolerate in their midst. So my understanding, Jace, is that you've brought me here to talk about consent and how consent shows up in our lives.
Yeah. And that's it. So one of the things about romance novels and the media that we consume that involves romance, a lot of that is what we take back into our life and expect from our partners and expect from our interactions. And that is severely lacking in general in both the media and also our lives. So we today are going to talk about what is consent? What do we look for when we mean consent? How do we take the learning into practice? And what should we start asking of the people who write our romance novels when it comes to consent? Caveat, note number one, all of that. I am fully aware that dark romance people, dubcon and non-con is a pillar of that genre trope. And that is different. That is fully intentional dubcon, dubious consent, or non-consent. I really want to tackle with Courtney today the mainstream media, are more typical, not dark, not even morally gray instances of romance that unfortunately lack consent at the beginning, throughout, and in many points just entirely miss the mark.
You know what just has occurred to me? If we ask ourselves what's being depicted in terms of a consensual sex scene in a show, say a streaming show, which parts of that are we going to include, right? We have to limit it. We don't want the whole 45 minutes of enjoyment plus 20 minutes of negotiation beforehand and 400 minutes of aftercare afterwards. We're trying to shrink this to fit a narrative, yeah? So we want the audience to understand these people are into it, that it's hot and steamy, that everyone's having a great time, everyone climaxes and feels satisfied, and then has that yummy, let's wrap ourselves in sheets feeling afterwards.
On the wet spot, because nobody changes
right,
the sheets.
Of course. I think the person making those decisions has not wondered to themselves, well, what if the audience isn't sure if both people want it?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's because, as we were stating earlier, the cishet white stranglehold on media and on storytelling.
Yeah.
That says an individual who has been granted the privilege to assume that consent is present for them whenever they're engaging might not think that that's an important part of a narrative for someone else.
Yeah.
So I think the more media that is made by women, by trans and queer folks, by folks who have survived multidimensional sex lives, the more likely we are to see those elements of a narrative included. The more likely someone is to value the part where character A and character B say, I've never done this with someone with a body like yours before. How do you want to do it?
Mm-hmm.
Or the part where they say, let's get a towel. Uh, you know, gosh, I'm drifting and I feel like I've gotten abstract already. Jeez, bring me
It's
back.
as I know. So it's as simple as, how do people who are making media,
Mm.
written certainly, and as you heard from Courtney's bio, for her, it's how do we show human bodies doing these things? How do we make sure that we're not assuming consent, but that we witness the ask and the response? Because the way that we portray a lack of consent is usually, well, I liked it, or it was great, or they're smiling at the end. But in reality, and we can talk about this like in very, here's a metaphor that I hope resonates with you all. There's the movie Say Anything, and John Cusack stands outside with a boombox. And unless she wanted him there, which we assume because of their history, but like, y'all, let's be real, that is a very brave, potentially stupid thing he's doing. But the only way we know that she wants it is because at the end she goes, oh, yay, and she runs off to meet him. If it were not wanted, that's creepy. That's stalking. And it's really in the eye of the beholder. So what it comes down to is, what is the intention? What is the impact? And how do you make sure that two or more people are getting on the same page when it comes to their intimacy?
Is something that I've really enjoyed talking about lately when I'm teaching consent is an idea of a state of consent. I think because culturally we've gotten really excited about trying to nail consent down, and I say we, meaning just North America in general, that folks are starting to want to adjudicate sort of who asked what when. And to me, that's beside the point. If the aim is for us to have consensual encounters, then the aim needs to be, how do we find a place of agreement or mutual understanding so that we can move forward in a consensual way, even if what we're consenting to is what you want and what I want are different and we need to go our separate ways.
Mm-hmm.
So I would be curious in a romance novel to experience some characters navigating their own boundaries, and maybe not exclusively once we get to capital letters foreplay. But as we were speaking about this story that we've both read earlier on about someone who's sort of held captive in a manor house and falling in love with their captor, the negotiation of boundaries of space, of sharing time together, of sharing meals together, of all of the intimacies of human life that are not exclusively touching our most sensitive places while nude, while the moonlight streams in a window. And I wonder if authors could give us a sense of those negotiations,
Mm-hmm.
if that might start to highlight that consent isn't something that's exclusively for the moment when I want to kiss somebody, but living in a consensual way with another person, engaging in a consensual relationship, regardless of the physical touch boundaries of that relationship, that's all available to us as well. And that's how we practice consent, by not bringing strawberries to our friend's house who's allergic to strawberries.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing and what I'm feeling is that consent is really the connection of communication and communicating effectively with a partner. Because whether it's, hey, what do you want to make for, can I make you dinner? Can I open your car door? Can I hold the door for you when you go in and out of a room or a building? That is, how do we interact with another human in a way that is respectful of their feelings and in a way that satisfies my desire to care, appreciate, show affection to them.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that beautiful metaphor of tea when it comes to consent.
Ha, the old tea video.
I'm sure it's outdated, but I will never forget it. Of, if someone comes over to your house, can you offer to give them tea, and they can say yes, and then you make them tea. If they say no, would you make them tea? No, of course not. If you then ask them what type of tea would you like, if they don't drink black tea and you only have black tea or you're only willing to make them black tea, well, don't make them tea. They've said they don't want black tea. Get them green tea. And if at some point they realize, you know what, this tea just isn't for me, I wanted brown sugar and not white sugar or whatever it is, honey or stevia or whatever sweetener is now there, they can put that tea down and say no, thank you, and be done with tea. And what are you not going to do? Force feed them tea
Mm.
at any point. And when it comes to intimacy of any kind, there are so many different roads and pathways that can stem from a single interaction. You can be on a date and the fact is you're on a date and you're together and there might be a connection, there might not be a connection, but the road could go down. Oh, maybe we have a hug goodnight. Maybe we have a kiss goodnight. Maybe we have a passionate kiss goodnight. Maybe we get a little handsy with our passionate kiss goodnight. Maybe we take this into my apartment. Maybe we take this into my apartment and clothes come off. Maybe we like, and there are so many different things that can go, that can happen from that one starting point of a date. And the assumption a lot of times in media of all kinds is, if I go on a date and I agree to kiss you, I'm also agreeing to have sex with you.
Mm-hmm.
And we have just eliminated and erased all of the personalization of desire that can truly exist. And you've almost forced a human to either go, I'm not going to kiss you, even though what I want might be to like have a beautiful, chaste kiss to see if your lips feel nice.
Mm.
If they don't want to have sex with you, they're like, I'm not ready for actual intercourse, then I can't even give you a chaste kiss. And that there's so much joy and love and pleasure to be had in those many other roads.
There are. And Chase, I'll note, even as you were describing that, you described a fairly standard escalation.
Yeah.
And the thing that I find us to be really lacking in narrative structure is when that escalation is interrupted. Say we have the chase kiss on the sidewalk. Say we go, yeah, let's take this inside and talk a little more. Oh, let's maybe try some kissing inside on the sofa. Oh, maybe. Then what if it reverses?
Yes.
Reverses down, if it de-escalates, hey, you know what? The kissing outside was really romantic, but now that we're inside and I see the way your house is decorated and I'm hearing the kissing, like I'm having some different ideas. Like maybe I'm ready to go home now, or maybe we cuddle and watch a show and there's no more kissing or intimate touching and we've de-escalated the situation. That I find to be rarely depicted in media, other than for intense dramatic effect, which is to say our hero's feelings are hurt, or our hero is in a bind and having to make a tough choice. We rarely see people who love each other going, you know what, I thought I was down, but I'm so tired. Let's cuddle instead.
And
that doesn't necessarily make the cut. Yeah, go ahead.
And that is really important, though, because that's where those consent check-ins are super important. Like, is this okay? Is this what you want? Or I'm feeling this. And I don't want to speak for every human, because this affects all humans who are desiring intimacy on any level. But if you aren't establishing the ability to say no when you ask a question, you almost limit the ability to say no when unprovoked. So if you don't say, hey, can I kiss you at the front door? Then maybe when you try to, we're making out on the couch and your hand goes up my shirt and I'm like, oh, that's enough. I don't feel safe or valued enough to say, hey, I'm not ready for you to put your hand up my shirt or unclasp my bra or remove that. That de-escalation almost gets taken off the table because you haven't established a relationship where you can say yes or say no.
Yeah, or say no, but not that, but something else.
Yeah.
Not that now, but maybe if we move into my bedroom, that'll feel better or whatever.
Yeah, it could have been the reason, like, I didn't want you to put your hand on my shirt might be that my window was open. You don't know.
Yep, or my weird cat is watching. I also want to say, Jace, just because you said earlier on, in sort of synthesizing my rambles, that consent is the communication. Consent really, truly is a question of an initiator creating an opportunity for the person with whom they want to initiate to direct the action, to say, full steam ahead, hold on, we need to discuss some stuff, or nope, that's not what's going down today. And then for that to be respected. The way I teach consent is I call it the 3 R's. There's a request, a response, and the crucial part is the third part, respecting that response.
Oh, okay. It doesn't really work in podcast form, but I wish you could say it like a little louder for the people in the back. So we're just gonna, but I want to make sure, especially as we go forward in this conversation, that the people who are listening understand what we mean by consent. And so if there's a definition that you would like to share with them so that they know we make sure that we're talking about the same thing and establish successful communication amongst ourselves and our listeners.
Yeah. So to me, consent is more of a state of being than a static checkbox on a form. If you go bungee jumping, they will give you a checkbox to check that says, I consent to the dangers of this activity. But when we're talking about interpersonal relationships, to me, it's more important to be holding the idea of, I want a consensual experience with my partner. That is, I want them to want what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I want the confidence to know that I have an affirmation that says, yeah, I love the way you touch me, or let's experiment with touching that way, or let's take it to this level or that level, or try it in this format or that format. So consent means the parties involved are in agreement. The responsibility for achieving consent is on the active party. If I want to kiss Jace right here, right now, through this screen, it's my responsibility to receive consent from them. And I'm sure plenty of people listening are going, does that mean we have to ask with words every single time? That sounds tedious. That sounds robotic. That sounds definitely not very sexy. I'll counter that with, Jace, can I kiss you? Hey,
Abso-fucking-lutely.
Jace, could I maybe kiss you later?
Oh my goodness. And that's it.
I think asking is an act of courage, and it is in and of itself confidence boosting, because no matter what my friend here says, they could say, heck no, that's not appropriate. We're recording a podcast. And I'd be like, peace. Thanks for answering. Thanks for being truthful with me. Thanks for receiving that question from me. Thanks for staying in relationship with me. No harm, no foul. I asked, I got an answer. We're still living in a space of mutual respect and pleasure and enjoyment in our conversation, our relationship. We're good.
And I think so many people get afraid of the answer, that they are afraid the answer will be no.
Yeah.
And you know what? Sometimes it is. Sometimes the answer of, can I kiss you is, oh, I just ate a garlic bagel. No, it's not. It's no. The answer is, I just get a, or I don't feel it. But as the person who's receiving the question, we often live in this state of limbo. Unless we're stating our intentions clearly, you might, I'm going to go back to this date understand, because so much of this starts with an intention to be intimate or to make a connection with someone. And in this day and age, that means going on dates. But going on many terrible dates. But in that experience, it is so hard to know, what does this person want from me? What is this person? Does this person even like me? And to have a person say, hey, I really want to kiss you right now. Can I? Oh my goodness. Even if your answer is no, that clarifies things for you. And as the person receiving that, even we're through a screen, we're absolutely, there's no way that Courtney can physically kiss me right now. But even through the moment, I went, oh my goodness.
I'm blushing.
I feel so special.
And this, even hearing you say like, oh yeah, the scenario of a date, say like we've got some folks, they met online, they decided to go out, they've met up together. But also this sometimes is playing games with your friend on the couch, and you know, it's been a long winter and you're like, you're looking good. Why don't we give this a try? I think part of what I'm running into when it comes to folks' understanding of consent and how consent operates in their lives is that
Mhm.
they either fear that it is something so legal or so sort of clinical, political, even, that it doesn't belong in their emotional, energetic, sensual, sexual life.
Yeah.
And to me, uh, it's it's tough to translate from my paradigm to that paradigm because for me, I strive to be consensual in all ways and all places. I strive to be nonviolent to the best of my ability. And to me, what that means is endeavoring to sense the needs of those around me and my own, to express mine whenever possible, to demystify that for the people around me so no one's trying to read my mind, and also to ask the questions that I need to ask to be able to move forward with my relationships. And sometimes those questions are, can I take you to bed right now? And sometimes those questions are, can we never talk about this subject ever again?
Yeah, and let's let's also I just want to say we're talking about consent as it relates to intimacy. There are
Mm,
lots of ways that we use consent in the rest of our lives to draw boundaries and hold and express boundaries and hold boundaries. And
mm,
it might be in a totally different way, but to understand how consent plays a bigger role in our life, it might be that you have a topic of conversation that it is no longer healthy for you to broach with a member of your family. I think that that is something that many people can relate to. It might be a sports team. It might be a political thing. It might be any. It might be their feelings on tomatoes. You don't know, but because of how you interact, you cannot consent, or you remove your consent, or to have a conversation with that person about this topic. And it's to draw that boundary in your life and to keep yourself safe and to keep your relationship healthy and to express your needs and hopefully have them met and respected by another person. And so right now we're talking about consent as it affects intimacy, but let's remember as humans, consent plays a bigger role in our life. Big umbrella consent.
yeah, to me, a consensual day in the life would be one in which all of my boundaries, as I've shared and expressed them, are being respected by the people with whom I've shared and expressed them. So the day on which my 4-year-old puppy doesn't punch me in the face with her paws would be the first day that ever happened. Um, I can't help but think, Jace, about all the assumptions that are involved in these things.
Hmm.
Like, because y- you brought up the idea of how the media portrays consent. I think the media is responsible for repeating some assumed cultural values and
Yeah.
assumed sort of procedures.
Hmm.
And I trained as an actor, and I was trained early on that if I was, say, I was supposed to play a character who needed to use a cane, that I shouldn't go and look at a movie with an actor using a cane to say, how do I use a cane? But that I should go, sit on the sidewalk and watch people walking by until I see a few people who use canes and observe humans in reality and their usage rather than another artist's portrayal of the thing. And I think with narratives, sometimes what we're getting is an artist repeating another artist's portrayal of the thing, rather than seeking in their own self or their own life or their own community, even for the language to describe a, a, a sensual encounter. There's a lot of repetition and a lot of sort of drawing from past sources, all of which continues to feed this idea that there's a shared cultural understanding of what happens after a kiss. Then it goes to this.
Hmm.
Um, when I think in our most animal and human experiences of romance in our individual lives, our consensual, joyful experiences, they have a rhythm of their own. They have a unique pattern depending on who's involved and what's going on in the world and how they're expressing themselves to one another. So, in order to see more consent in the media, I think we could see more diversity of interaction. Full stop.
Hmm.
If our writers would give us more of escalation, de escalation, if they would give us more of some fumbling that doesn't use the same language for a fumbling first kiss that we've heard over and over and over again, but that somehow describes uh, the sensations or the experiences of a unique body in space.
Hmm. I appreciate how you ask the question of how does existing media affect media being written? And it's almost repetitive, cyclical nature. And that is certainly true when it comes to that microcosm that is media. And even more dangerously, what people see is how they think they should act, which is what they think they want to see, which reinforces how they've acted, which informs how they ask for what they want to see. It's this terrible spiral of how did we get from point A to point F? I mean, I'm not an anthropologist, but I think certainly portrayal of sexual encounters in the media have not helped how we view our escalation, de-escalation relationship with sex and intimacy. And I almost wonder, listening to you say that, if it would be easier or more acceptable, first off, because ultimately the goal is for all of our encounters that we see, that we read, that we experience ourselves to be consensual and on the huge, beautiful spectrum of everything of everything that sex can be. But within existing relationships, to watch people who are in existing or committed or long-term relationships have those moments of escalation and de-escalation, to have those moments of how do I change what's happening? Because also there's a sense of for the most part, there's a sense of safety in those established relationships. And I think people would feel safer watching an established couple kind of go through the rigmarole of communicating poorly and learning
Mm.
how to communicate effectively. But in that the meet cute or the first encounter, or maybe it's just for fucking laughs, those fumbles or those missteps, there's already a sense of, oh, how's this going to go? And it's not fair. It's not fair. But it does reinforce this weird idea. And, I can't imagine that watching a piece of media or reading a book where at the end of it, everybody seems happy and satisfied doesn't make you think, well, I guess that's how you get happy and satisfied. Maybe I should recreate that.
Yeah, I mean, we're partly, I think, as a culture in the USA, we suffer from our very, very terrible sexual education system,
Well,
which leaves a lot on music videos to teach the children what to do, you know? And I think the fear with which adults often approach conversations with young people about sex and sexuality also contributes to this idea that there is kind of a way, that
mhm.
there is a sort of an inevitable escalation to sexual contact that should be feared. And that's pretty deeply embedded for a lot of people. I'm also thinking of, dear listeners, take a moment and ask yourself where you learned the words you use inside your own mind for your body. Are those the words that came from the doctor's office? Are those the words that came from family? Are those the words that came from songs and TV?
I remember the first time, oh gosh, I remember the first time that I read in a book someone calling a vulva, I'm going to use the doctor term, a vulva and a
Mm.
vagina, a cunt. And I was like, I was shook. It was
Mm.
absolutely shocking and
Mm.
offensive. And I was
Mm.
not okay with it because
Mm.
that's what I was told not to be. And since then, it is a very common term in romance novels for both. And I also remember the first moment I had a female point of view talk about their own vulva with that term. And I went,
Mm.
holy fuck.
Ah.
Because that however long ago, or even maybe now for you, is a word that is derogatory and mean and offensive and is said with the utmost disrespect for the beautiful, beautiful thing that is a vulva. Vulvas are beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. We're just going to put that out there. And that is a big shift that I've seen in the language used in romance scenes as just an example of like how our exposure to things in the media can change our opinion of something. The first time, I'd never thought about it. That was a mean and offensive, and I never would even think about that term. And then I read it once and I was shocked and scandalized. And then it became more prevalent and I became less scandalized. And now I'm like, okay, great. And then I remember a woman saying, and I'm like, wow, women can say that too. Or people with vulvas can call their own vulvas cunts. Oh my gosh. And now it doesn't even faze me. It's not my favorite term for it, but it doesn't faze me the way that it did that first time.
Yeah, fascinating. There's just so much media. You made the point about the Academy Awards, that there are so many films, and rarely are more than 2 or 3 of them really honored, period. But we live in a world now where there's so much media being created that it's hard to say, how does the media portray consent? And happily, I think we have some portrayals that are healthy and complicated and contextual and informative in a very real way. And then I think we continue to have this sort of skating through, gesturing towards romance that has often happened in media, to say, and the music swells and the lights go down and we wake up in the morning and everyone's drinking coffee and clearly there was intercourse or something.
Some sort of satisfaction. And
we hope.
I want to make like magical vibrating dick jokes so badly right now. Because that's apparently what every penis is supposed to be. And I think this podcast and this conversation is really geared toward women, cis, trans, or anyone who feels like they don't, or they are suffering at the hands of the general cis het white patriarchy. But the thing about sex is, and consent is, it feels like men are taught, and the onus is on them, and that it's yes or no or this or that. And I think we need to broaden our understanding of what does it mean to be in a state of consent as we're talking about it. To like, even if it's like, hey, here's a moment of questioning that could potentially happen during an intimate moment, is like, if someone's got their finger in a vulva, can I add a second one? That's a moment of discourse, of communication. Is what I'm doing working for you? Can I change it up? How do we like this? Yes or no? Or, you know what, that's not real. Like,
and just to be perfectly explicit, what you're suggesting is, as opposed to someone with a finger in a vulva simply adding a finger with the assumption that that's welcome, and with the anticipation that they will remove it if told to do so, or they will respond if shut down after taking that action, as opposed to asking before the action.
And what we've mentioned is, if you're not in a state of consent, the person who's got the vulva with a finger in it, if you're not in a state of consent, or you don't feel like your partner is there with you, then you might not feel the permission or the ability to say no, even if that's what you really mean, if a second or even third finger is just put in your vulva. And that can lead to discomfort and a disconnect and frustration, pain. Let's also say that pain, and might mean that the whole and you don't know, like, the person who's stuck the finger in the vulva might have had a partner previously who said explicitly to them, that's what I want from you.
Sure.
And it's hard when every single person in an interaction has been brought up without learning how to get, receive, or express consent. It's hard. And so one of the things that I really want is we all suffer. Everyone who is here in America and North America suffers at the hands of the cishet white patriarchy. We do. That is just a part of living here. But in the conversation that I want to have with women here is, how do we take ownership back? How do we understand what consent should be and not what it pretends to be? How do we determine whether or not we're in a state of consent or a partner is in a state of consent with us? How do we learn to express ourselves within that state of consent without fear? And that's a bigger conversation maybe. And how do we then start to demand more education to our partners, either because we educate them or because we demand it of how these interactions are portrayed?
Whew.
It's a really light topic.
I know. Okay, I have a couple ideas. Here are some of them.
That concludes part 1 of this conversation with Courtney Abbott. I know that you are not done, because I was certainly not done delving into this topic with her. So come back next week for part 2. That's it for today, y'all. This has been a 3 Paws Productions podcast. Our producer is Sephi. Michael Achenbach is our patient editor. Our theme song is written and performed by Diana Weishauer. You can find show notes and so much more at jacereadsromance.com. That's JAYCE Reads Romance. Follow along on TikTok and Instagram at Jace Reads Romance. If you'd like to ask a question or share a story for the podcast, call and leave a message at 661-JACE-RR. That's 661-529-2377. Or send an email to jace@jacereadsromance.com. Finally, like and subscribe so you can get every episode when they drop. You can also leave us a review to help others find us. And remember, this is Jace holding space for you.